Hello again everyone, this is Old Dad coming to you in my 7th tutorial on route creation in Microsoft Train Simulator 2021. In this tutorial we continue the work we started in the last tutorial, laying track on grades. We are using Google Earth to set the elevations on the track. I suggest you watch that tutorial first before you watch this continuation. So much of what we do in the simulator to create a route is procedural, and if you don't start off in the right manner, you will make a big mess of things in pretty short order. Patience is very important when working with this program. Sometimes things fly right along, and then at other points, such as going over a mountain or crossing a deep valley on a bridge, things can get a little complicated. I've been creating a route in the simulator for over a year, learning techniques by watching other video tutorials on YouTube and through trial and error methodology. My tutorials are long, but I think it's the best way to let you see what is involved in route creation. I by no means say that my methods are best or the only way to do things. They work for me, and I think you might learn some good tricks to get going on your own route. I suggest you watch other tutorials and get as much information as you can before you start creating a route. Okay, so I had taken a break recording this tutorial, and I went from one day to the next, and during the night the program has updated the Google map. In the previous page we had a single track here in the Google overlay. That is the way the track used to be at this location. Recently, in the last couple of years, CSX has added a second main track to the line, and apparently overnight, in between my stopping recording the tutorial on the previous day to today, they updated the map somehow within the program with the Google overlay. So now I sort of look like I'm in the wrong position here, but we're going to work around that, and we're going to come on up here and line it up with the track that we should be lined up with. So bear with me as we come upon an unexpected change. What we're going to be doing here, instead of using the leveling the grade as we go along, we're going to actually use these pins that we have set. So we'll get started by turning off the snap to terrain, and I know that coming up here I was running about 0.8%, 0.88, it's actually 0.9 as we see. Well, now it says 0.8. We made some adjustments, so it's actually 0.8. So we're going to set this for 0.8 on the gradient, and we're going to make certain that snap to terrain is turned off. And then when we begin to lay track, go ahead and set our speed to 45 again. And we'll start laying some track and see if we can't pull this into the proper position. I'm actually going to lengthen this tangent just a little bit. Now here we've got another Google Earth anomaly to deal with. Let me just unclick that for a moment. Right here we see where with this new map we've got a terrible mismatch in the way the maps themselves line up. The satellite imagery sometimes is not perfect, and you can see the Norfolk Southern track is wrong, the highway is wrong, and the CSX line is wrong. So sometimes you just have to work with that and kind of make an accommodation for it. So we're going to pull this now up and start laying the track. We're going to see if we can set these grades. I'm going to pull up here and kind of come to a stop. Looks like I'm significantly off there, so let's undo that. And I'm actually going to undo this straight that I had, and I'm going to shorten that up. Let's shorten it up to about right here. And now pull it around and see what that looks like. I'll snap that down there. And notice that we can't see anything. That's because we're actually buried under the terrain, even going up at 0.9. Google Earth didn't do a good job, or I'm sorry, the DEMX in the program didn't do a good job of creating the actual gradient for the railroad here. So what we'll do is we'll take the snap to terrain tool and we'll just uncover that so we can see it a little better. Now we'll come back to our track and see what that looks like. Looks like I'm still pulling my radius a little far. And it does appear that Google Earth has stopped loading. That's the first time I've experienced that anomaly. Let's turn Google Overlay off and turn it back on. Okay, I had to tick the button here which lets it follow. This little play button allows it to follow if you push the pause button. So there's something we learned today. You learn something new every day in life, and I just learned something myself. The little play button needed to be ticked. Coming over here looking at this race, it looks like I've pulled it a little far. I could try using the split tool here and see if we can shorten it up and put it where it wants to be. And we'll try laying another piece of track just for the fun of it and see how well it lines up. I'll pull it to right there. We'll use the snap tool again and we'll run up through here and see how well it lines up. Looks like we're heading off at the wrong angle. So let's click on that piece of track, delete it. We're still not right coming around the curve. I'm going to delete that one again also. So much of this again is trial and error. We'll split this just a little bit and we'll start off again. We can come around far enough because you see I'm heading off in that direction. And do it one more time. Hey, that's looking pretty good, huh? I've reached the 500 meter mark and I see another point there that we may have a map anomaly that may cause us a problem. Let's go to the snap tool. Back to the track. Remember, if the end of the track is buried in the terrain, you will not be able to get the Linear Objects tool to connect to your track again. We'll pull this up right to our marker there and stop. There's a reason I did that. That's where I want to have a point at which we'll be able to set the elevation. Go back to the snap tool. Follow it back down, see what it looks like. Looks like we're still holding pretty good with our tangent in line. we're going to come back and adjust these elevations after we get a couple of more pins up the track with our track laying. Snap in place. Here's another pin. We'll take our snap. We're still fairly decent on grade. I'm still coming up at 0.9 on the track, although actually the grade could be getting steeper. We will raise that terrain back up with the snap to track tool as we roll on. Let's go another pin. We'll go one more pin and then we'll take a look at what the elevations do to our grade. Got to get through a little section of radius here. I think I'll pull that up just a little bit farther there, and then we'll try pulling around here and see what happens. Let's use the snap tool now. Looks like I added a piece of track I didn't want there. I'll delete that. Now let's continue to add some track to the next pin. Looks like I'm heading off in the wrong direction, so let's shorten that up just a little bit. Use the split method. We'll split that back to about right there and see what that does. Pull it up to this pin and stop. Go back to the snap. I think that looks pretty good. That was the last pin that we had set. We set 6 new pins. Okay, now we're going to go use our elevations and actually set the track to the elevation that Google Earth said it should be. And we have that over here in our grade calculator Excel sheet. So we know we had this pin height set correctly at 205.74 for 675 feet. Now as we look on around our next point here, we don't actually have an elevation marker, so we're going to add one there by just left clicking. Now we can adjust the height on this. Our next pin should be 685 feet or 208.78. So we're going to raise that up to 208.78. Go to the next pin. Now this may be a bit of a problem because we actually had that elevation pin set a little over 500 meters. And you see we don't have an elevation arrow here, so I'm going to put one there. But now I've got this one in the middle of things. We'll have to raise it up to something that corresponds with the elevation it should be by sighting the track, and I'll show you how to do that. So this marker should be 704 feet, or 214.57. Remember, if you need to get precise, you've got to get down here very close to get it down to the number that you want it. 214.57. So we need to bring this up to something around 214.50, let's say. Now here's a strange thing that happens sometimes with this program. It begins to not want to raise the track up in unison where you've got a joint. And you've got to work with it a little bit sometimes to actually get it to cooperate. Let's take this up to 214.50. We'll put it there just for the fun of it. Now you see when I put another up arrow there, it connected it back together. Now we're joined together like we should be. Now as we look at it here, we're up a little higher than we should be. So let's go back here, and from this angle we will lower it down to make it look a little more appropriate. I think I got an extra arrow there I don't want. So I highlighted it and hit the delete key one time, and that put us where we need to be. Sometimes when you get a grade corrected, it will give you a little red line down between the sections that you're connecting and lowering, kind of indicating that you've gotten it to the right location. It's not going to do that this time, but I'm going to do it by eye. That looks pretty good. Don't see an elbow there. Let's see what the track looks like here. That's a 1% grade. This is a 1.1% grade. Alright, let's continue on to our next marker, which should be 715 feet, or 217.93. Continue on to the next marker, and this should be 222.50. Well, here we go again. Hit the undo, make it go back. Let's try it again. Alright, we'll just come up 222.50. Don't panic when it does that. It'll usually put itself back together. Next marker, 224.33. Just easing the mouse around, small movements at a time. Put us where we need to be sometimes. All right, here we are at 229.20. Okay. Now let's look back at the whole thing. It's a pretty good looking grade. I don't see any elbows to speak of. Let's see what we're doing here. That's a 1.1. This is a 1.1. This is a 0.8. This is a 1. This is a 1. And by 1 I mean 1% grade. I'm getting that information off the bottom information bar here. Got a 1.1. Okay, now just for the fun of it, let's look at the old profile chart and see what it tells us. So here we are, we left the crossing, we made it to the next curve, and then we started up. And we started out from that crossing at a 0.8 up to a 0.82, 0.85, a 1.02. And this long straightaway we're running between 1 and 0.99, which you might as well call a 1. And then it goes to like a 0.8 before we started this next curve. So we've gotten fairly accurate grades out of Google Earth by comparison. Yeah, there's some different anomalies there, and when I use the profile chart to actually lay the track, I actually try to get every one of those gradient changes in there. And that's the wonderful thing about having the profile chart. You can do that. But using this method, we're doing the best that we can with the information that we have available. If you have no profile chart, you can work strictly with Google Earth, and that's a reasonable grade. That's a 1% grade. That's a mainline grade, meaning it climbs 1 foot in every 100 feet. And I don't see any major deviations. No elbows, no sharp gradient changes. I think it's turned out fairly well for us. So, something looks out of whack with that right there, but I'm going to leave it as is for the moment. So what we would next have to do is use the snap to terrain tool, or snap to track tool, excuse me. And I want to set the brush about the same as what I had the, well, it is set the same. So let's go back and we're going to raise our terrain back up to where we're snapped to. As we go down through here. We're going to bring it back up to the level of the track. We had a much deeper cut there because of the fact that the gradage changed, and I had left it at 0.9, not knowing what that gradient change was, because I'm working strictly from Google Earth and not a profile chart. When you do use the profile chart, you get much more accurate alignment as you go along, and you don't wind up having to go back over some of this and bring it back up. But it only takes a moment. See, there we are. Now let's turn off the Google overlay. And you can see we've got a fairly decent piece of railroad here now, going up at the prototypical actual gradients, around 1%. I got a bugaboo right here. Looks like somehow I pulled a slight radius in that when I snapped that track down, and that's bugging me. But it's going to be easy to fix, and I want to show you how. Now that I've got this grade set, I'm going to go back to track. I'm going to turn off this. I want to reset the grade. I'm going to use the snap to track, and I'm going to relay this piece of track. You see the curve in it? I do not like that. Let's delete that back down. And we'll set up. And I don't know how that happened. But at some point when I was quickly snapping through doing the track, it was not tangent. And that's why I guess I had pulled it over to meet that. So we're going to need to do a little trim job here, which we can do with the split tool, and we'll split it back to about right there, and we'll try laying it again and see what it looks like. I'm not going to make any adjustments. I'm just going to see how it looks if we pull it up there. Yeah, I think I'm liking that. Sorry about jerking you around so much. I know it makes some people motion sick. I apologize for that. Hey, but that's nice and straight now. Perfect. All right, now we'll check that gradient. We're supposed to be at 229.20. And boy, we're darn close. There's 229.24. We'll just, well, actually, let's do this, because I had run it right to the post before. Let's put a tiny split on that and see if that puts us where we're supposed to be. 229.17. Well, we'll just fudge it and we'll pull it up to 229.20. Had to pull in a little closer where I can get it a little more precise. Well, it jumped on me there, folks. Let's get down at the right angle. There we go, 229.20, where we're supposed to be. So, we are now ready. I'll turn off snap to track. And we are now ready to go and set some more pins. So let's get to the end of, we have a reverse curve going on here. So I think what I'll do is I'll go to the middle of that and set a pin. So let's look at Google Earth. Here's our reverse curve. Let's see what we got here. Somewhere in the middle, 780, 781. So looking at the corner of this lake might be a good spot to set it up and call it 780. So our next mark will be 780. That seems like an awfully large change between that point and that point. Let's go back and look at that again in Google Earth. Let's see where we are in the program. I think I'm one curve ahead of myself. And I was. Because there's the end of that curve, and this is the middle of the curve that I want to be looking at. So, let's go back here and look at this point. In between the two, where this radius ends, there's a short straight, a short tangent, and then the next radius begins. You don't usually have a reverse curve that goes from curve to curve without some sort of small straight, even the smallest straight section, to allow the cars and the elevation to change. There needs to be a certain amount of straight in there in real life in order for the forces within the train to not be excessive that might cause it to turn over. So like you're coming through this curve with some super elevation, then it would go to flat in the tangent, and then the super elevation would pick back up as you enter this radius. So anywhere in the middle here, let's call right off this spot right here, off the tree line there from the field down to here, and we'll say it's about 758. So we'll make our next pin in the middle of that curve, right off here, and we'll make it about 758. There's the edge of the forest. I'm going to call it about right there, and that becomes 758. That looks more reasonable, doesn't it, folks? Because I had picked 780 because I was in the wrong curve. Now let's go to the next spot that we might entertain putting a pin. And I would suggest it be at the end of this curve. And we'll set it sort of at the tree line edge here. I think that's reasonable. And let's go to Google. And see what we look like there. $764. Looks like a pretty good number. $764. Alright, and we'll go to the next straight. Now this section of track that we're looking at is the north end, railroad north end of the lead going into Wauhatchie Yard. Let's look at it in Google. In fact, you see a train in this image going down grade, crossing over the Norfolk Southern once again, AGS line, and also US Highway 11 to Birmingham, and then it leads down and makes its way back until it enters the Wauhatchie Yard. So the trains in the yard would come out and leave on this lead, climbing steeply up until it reached the main line, where we're just about to lay some track. So at some point we will add this track. But right now we're going to concentrate on continuing this main line right up through here. So we'll go to the end of this curve, which is about right here, I would say. And we're going to look for an elevation of, looks like 776 feet. So let's go back and let's set us a pin. See, there's a crossover there also, so that trains coming down this track could cross over and go straight into the yard if need be. Let's see what that looks like by comparison. So I see there's a power line right away through there. And here's the power line right away, so we're right around the radius. And we agreed that that would be 776 feet. So we'll type that one in. Now we've got another location here where we have a tangent in the middle of two radiuses in a reverse curve. I'm going to line it up with about the edge of that field. And if we look at Google Earth, I think I called that a field, but it's actually a pond. Yes, it is a pond. I apologize, my bad. All right, let's see what we got. Right along the edge here, looks like we're around 780 feet. I think that's about where we were before, so we'll call that 780. And we'll look at our next pin. Which I'll probably pull that whole thing as one radius around that curve. So let's get to the middle of this tangent. You see, we come out of a curve into a tangent and then into a curve. Got to have that tangent in the middle, otherwise things happen. I guess that's about right. Now notice that we're still paralleling Interstate 24. We're crossing under the interstate. And we're going to go for an elevation of 795. Tick off 3D just for a moment there and see what that gives us. Yep. I'm going to call it 795. I actually like it in 3D mode because it makes the bridges appear the way they should appear. And we're going to make that our final pin for now. 795. Okay, so let's pull the track on from where we ended up to that point. This is very hilly terrain, and there are some steep cuts in some of this, so don't be deceived when you look at that and say, wow, that looks awfully deep. The railroad is considerably below the interstate in some locations here. Okay, let's get back to the track, and we're going to set this to 0 and not snap to drain. Actually, I'm going to change that back to about, let's make it 1 inch of 1%, excuse me, 1 foot and 100 feet. And let's leave that on the incline like that, because we know we're climbing here. There's no doubt about it. All of our measurements that we've made indicate that we're climbing. So adding some grade into that just eliminates some of the down that you have to take. I'm going to reduce the speed to 30 in these curves. I don't actually have a timetable here to tell me what the actual railroad speed is, but if I had to make a guess, these curves are probably 30-mile-an-hour curves. So I'm going to pull this up to about right here, and then we'll have to use the snap tool until we can get it leveled the way we want it. Back to the track. Undo that. We obviously missed it. 30, 30, and yard. I appreciate everyone's patience as we go through this. It's a process. Definitely a process. Alright, so we're going to have a little tangent section here now. And then we'll start the next curve. We're going to pull it around to this pin and use the snap tool again. Hopefully nobody's going to sleep during this process. Oh, see it showing up there. Looks like I'm pretty far off the path. So let's go ahead and do a quick little split job there on it and see if we can do something better than that. Now we'll try it again. Oh, that looks much better, doesn't it? Ha 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 ha. So let's do this. Let's pull it up to this pin right here and stop. And then we'll use the snap tool, and I may relay that whole piece because my speeds are obviously wrong. Looks like we're still lining up pretty good there, folks. Now see, this actually moves along rather quickly once you get the process in your mind of how it goes, and you become more practiced at actually laying the track. We're moving right along. You can lay several miles of track, get it polished up and looking good in fairly short order. I think I blew that just a little bit. Let's hit one undo, re-snap, and stop just a little bit shorter this time. I think I hit the wrong button. I right-clicked when I should have left-clicked. let's do one little split. Now, if you don't get the track set correctly speed-wise, there's a way that I will show you that you come back and reset the whole track by using the select tool, and then you can change the track speed at any time if you decide that we didn't come far enough. So I'm going to undo that and we'll start again. Bring it right up to here. And let's see if we can pull this around this corner and have it look like anything. I'd like to get it the entire way around that curve if I possibly can. I've reached the end of the 500 meters. So I'm going to snap it right there right quick. And we're going to go ahead and run the snap tool over it so we can get a good look at how we're actually laying in that curve. Something looks like we're off back here, right? But we need to have it down to the height. Oh wow, we're way inside, aren't we? Because this is double track in the era that I am attempting to model here. If you were doing it in a different era, where we had the double track where we started, and that would not be there potentially. So let's highlight that piece of track. See, we're too far into the curve here. We've got to come around a little bit more in the straight, I think. Let's put a marker down and lay that hole straight down. All right, we're down to here. I'm going to come just a little bit farther. I'm going to come to here. So actually I'm going to delete that piece of straight. I'm going to set up from the beginning and we'll try it one more time. I appreciate your patience. It's hanging in here, watching me lay this track, because I hope that you get enthused and want to lay some track on your own creation. Okay, we've reached the end of it there. I'll snap that right there and we'll see what this looks like. I think that looks much better. Now how can we check it to be sure? We come over here and we hit the Google overlay, and we actually can raise it up so we can see where that blends in. Oh, I think we're blending in right on top of exactly where we want to be. See, I'm raising and lowering the Google overlay. I think that's nearly perfect. Okay, there we are. Then if we were going to continue on around, we could try setting. See, I didn't come far enough in the tangent, but need to come up to about right here. May have gone a little too far, but that's as far as we're going to go for this tutorial. Now, what are we ready to do, folks? We're ready to actually set those elevations again. So we'll head back down, past the underpass. Keep right on going down to where we left off. Which I believe should be right here at 229.20 at 752 feet. So our next marker should be right here at 231.03. which is interesting. Leaving it set on 1% as we came around here has gotten us almost perfect. See, I had to hardly move this at all. There we go. And our next mark would be 232.86. So it may be slightly less than 1%. So I'm actually having to take it down just a fraction. Strange how it doesn't always want to gel together and hang together, but it's one of the little anomalies of the program you'll get used to, and you can adjust it. You will learn to do it. Alright. Next is 236.52. Got to go down some more. So it appears that I am correct in saying that the grade's actually a little less than 1% at this point. So this point is actually where we're supposed to make our next adjustment, and that is 237.74. I have to make an adjustment here. Another fluky one. $237.74. We'll say $237.80 and just see what it looks like after we get the snap tool around some of it. Now we're going around our big curve to the final destination, where we should have $242.31. And that will make this one a similar number. Make it about 27 just for the fun of it. Now let's use our snap to terrain tool and see what this whole thing looks like. We have decreased grade. Even though I had this set for 1%, we have actually decreased the grade, and we're actually under the scenery a little bit. So we'll see. We'll cheat in a minute. We'll use the profile chart and see how close we are on some of these measurements. Now using the snap tool, and I believe this is where we started. Okay. Go to the track. Click on that. We got a 1.1% there. 0.9% there. 0.9. 0.9. 0.9. These are the gradients that we have determined via using the measurements out of Google Earth. Now we're at 0.6, 0.1, 0.9, and that's around the corner. That stays 0.9. Now, let's, for the fun of it, go over here and look at the old profile chart and see where that is taking us. And when we ended up in that long straightaway, we were around 0.9. Let's see if we can do this. No, it won't let me do that. It's gonna disappear beyond. Now let's look on here. We got 0.9, 0.1. I'm sorry, 1.03, 0.9, 0.7, 1.06, 0.86, 0.42, and then there's a little bit of 1.42, and then we're in this long sharp curve going under the interstate. Here's the state line. We're actually at the state line when we're at that location. So I think we were pulling a 0.9 in that curve, and look at that, it's 0.91. There's some variation back through here, but you know what? Because you don't have access to the profile chart, I think we're doing pretty darn good. And I'm always amazed that when I get to a certain point, you know, I've got a gradient that is fairly close to what the profile chart calls for when we've only pulled a number out of Google Earth. I think that's pretty fantastic. Now, before we move on, let's just run down our track and see what it looks like and see if there are any major elbows or anything in it. Let's get rid of Google Overlay because it's much smoother when we do that. As I told you earlier, this is one of my previous tutorials. The old track people, when you're laying track in the manual methods, when you're not using a surfacing machine that uses a laser light, like the modern track people use, in the old days they would carry them a cushion, and the gang leader or the foreman, or maybe one of the other men, if they were feeling generous that day, they would throw a cushion down beside the rails and sit on that cushion, and they would lean their head down and they would sight down along the top of that rail, and they would level the track. So we've come here. Here's one of those spots where we had a little, there's our actual grade setting there. So let's look at this. And that curve is 0.9. I think we need to come up. We got a little bit of an elbow right there. So let's adjust that. Let's set the gradient. Tool. We're at 237.80. Let's come up just a bump and just see what happens. I noted that so I could go back if I don't like the change that I make. That looks a little better. It's still 0.9 around that long piece. And that's at 0.4, where I believe before it was at 0. Just for the fun of it, let's look. And we look here into that long curve. A little sharp, looks like 1.42, but right before that there was some 0.4 back there. We may not be in exactly the right spot with it, but I'm still constantly amazed at how these measurements take place. But anyway, he would sit down on his cushion and he would sight down the top of the rail, and the men with the jacks and the jacking bars would jack the track. If there was a low spot, he would give them a hand signal and they would jack up until he felt like that elevation was correct, and they would stop jacking, and then they would hand tamp with the ballast forks the ballast in around the cross ties. That's what the old section men used to do. In the United States, they were called section men, and they would repair the track on a particular section of the railroad. And in one of my early tutorials, I showed you some section houses on the Tracy City branch, and they lived right beside the tracks. The railroad provided their house, and boy, I'm thrilled. Look at this grade; it's just perfect. I don't think it could be any better than this. And when we actually run a train over it, when I teach you how to put a train in your railroad, we'll have some fun pulling a steep grade on the main line. So I've shown you how to use Google Earth to set elevations, and that's the way I do it. I'm not saying it's the perfect way of doing it. Now you see the differences in our pins that we put on there? They're way up in the air in some cases, where we've dramatically changed the topography as we used our snap tool and actually got the railroad set into the location. I think it's turned out very well. I hope you give this a try, and I hope this gives you some ideas on how to set the grades. One of the most important things you will do is to have a smooth gradient. We've gone under the interstate, and the railroad continues on and makes its way around all these ridges, and eventually, we're running out of terrain. I'm going to have to add some more terrain. That's something else. Look, we've reached the end of the earth, into the flat world again. That's important to know, and that's something we'll talk about, because you can really ruin a railroad if you're not careful how you add that terrain. It will cover what you've already done, and all these cuts and everything will disappear and make a real mess of it. So you got to be careful, and that's something we'll learn in another tutorial. When we reach the edge of the earth over there, we'll add some more terrain. But that's fascinating. We've actually created a lot of track from where we started in downtown Chattanooga, and we're just kind of flying over here. I apologize. I'm rambling on and talking my slow southern drawn out way of talking. You guys are getting a snicker out of it, and that's okay. I'm probably snickering at the way you talk if you're from up north somewhere. Not to be mean. There's the beginning of our railroad. So we've laid, well, let's look at that profile chart again. I keep going back to that. I know I'm cheating. So we started, I think, at the, where is number 1? We started here at Craven's at about the 149. And now we've passed the 144, and we're all the way up here about the 142 milepost. So we've laid, what, 7 miles of track, roughly? Oh, I'm sorry, we're at the 143, 6 miles of track that we've laid. So we're making progress, and we'll continue to make progress, and I hope you come back for my next tutorial. Thank you for watching. Give me a like, leave a nice comment. I'll take criticism, but be nice when you criticize, and maybe we can all figure out a way to agree. Something the world needs: agreement. Sometimes this is a good outlet for all the stress of the world. Hope you enjoy my tutorials. Continue to watch, and we'll have another one soon. Good day.